Today we're exploring a city that was mostly flattened in World War II, but was meticulously rebuilt with incredible precision in the years that followed. The old town has not lost much of its authenticity and still feels like it's hundreds of years old, even though it doesn't present as such. Venture a little further out, and Warsaw is a thriving modern metropolis, but everywhere you look, there are reminders of a complicated and often tragic past. It's a fascinating city with a lot of stories to tell, and 2 days is simply not enough. But I'm going to do my best. We're starting day one on the edge of the old town in Castle Square. In one direction you have the royal route that heads towards the presidential palace, and in the opposite direction is the historical centre. Right in front of you is the massive Royal Palace, which is now a museum open to the public. The modernisation of this area is evidenced by the massive Pizza Hut nearby and various big chain coffee stores. But this does not take anything away from the charm of the unusually even cobblestone streets and the very neatly presented buildings lining them. All surrounded by a city wall that replicates an 800-year-old fortification that surrounded the original city. You will find a number of statues and memorials along the city walls, with the most memorable for me being the Little Insurrectionist, a tribute to child soldiers who fought in the Warsaw Uprising, an event that I'll be learning a bit more about later in this itinerary. As you wander the streets, you'll find plenty of artistic decorations, buildings with interesting facades, and a sprinkling of information points that help you navigate the area. In the middle of it all is the old market square, which is quite a spectacle and feels very grand, all while being relatively small compared to similar landmarks around other Polish cities. Here you will find the Sarenka Warszawska, aka the Protector of Warsaw, right in the centre of the square. The edges are flanked with colourful buildings that are all uniquely decorated and house various museums, galleries and souvenir shops. There are plenty of touristy restaurants, of course, and I couldn't help myself. I just wanted to sit in this square, take in my surroundings and eat a Polish lunch. And it was pretty tasty. I loved both the flavours and the bulkiness of the bread and soup combination. Definitely my kind of food. From here you could head in any direction to further explore the streets. I was most tempted by the Cold War Museum, but I think I was in the minority because the underground hallways were almost empty. Which didn't bother me at all because I was easily able to wander through 40 years of history and intriguing political tension at my own pace. By the time I made it back to Castle Square, the activity in the area had really stepped up a notch, but it was still far from crowded. And before I headed in the opposite direction along the Royal Route, I wanted to first check out the nearby observation deck. Unfortunately, it's not quite high enough to see beyond the immediate area, so it was a little bit of a letdown even though the view was okay. So it was a very short stopover. The entry fee was cash only, so keep that in mind as it's the first time I encountered that all day. The Royal Route had a long construction site running through the centre of it at the time. But this did not take anything away from the stunning buildings on either side of the street. It was just harder to cross in some sections. Highlights included St. Anne's Church, the Presidential Palace, the University of Warsaw, Czetwertyński Uruski, and the Holy Cross Church. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Further down the street was the Nicolaus Copernicus Monument. Now that was a name I had not heard since the original Back to the Future. I believe there's also a science centre located nearby named after him. You could easily spend multiple days in this area if you wanted to spend more time in the various museums and art galleries along this street. While I had covered some serious ground so far today, I still felt like I had plenty left in the tank to make it back to my hotel on foot so I could explore more of this corner of the city. So I backtracked a little towards Saxon Gardens, where the tomb of the unknown soldier is placed right near the entrance. The park itself was a nice change after looking at buildings all day, and had some nice and quiet places to sit and relax in the shade. Not far away is the Palace of Culture and Science, which is an impressive looking building that you can see from all over town. What I didn't know at the time is that right up the top there is also a public viewing deck, which would have been a far better choice than my earlier visit in the Old Town. So if you are headed there, please don't miss out on this one because it would be the best view in town. While my hotel was far from the tourist centre, it was in the middle of a commercial hub with plenty of food options and bars nearby. It had a really nice buzz in the evenings, but after covering many kilometres on foot throughout the day, I was destined for an early night. This video should have been a 3-day Warsaw itinerary, but on day 2 I got quite ill for reasons I'll never know and barely made it out of the hotel room the entire day. So I only have 2 days of genuine exploring to share with you and had to make some tough choices on how I would spend my now limited time. I opted to stay on this side of the river and head to the Warsaw Uprising Museum. I'd seen many references to this while in the Old Town and wanted to immerse myself in the stories and get a deeper understanding of this rebellion against the Nazis in the later stages of World War II. The museum is really well done and tells some very personal stories. I was impressed with the level of detail provided about the owners of some very basic personal items and how they came to be part of the uprising story. It really helped me connect with the impossible situation that they faced in a way that most museums are unable to do. While I encourage everyone to visit this museum and experience it for yourself, there are 2 things that I wanted to reference specifically. The first is the sign above the entry door. It's hard to imagine your home being wedged in between the Soviet Union and Germany throughout the Nazi campaign. The sheer courage to make a statement like this and have your people stand behind it in the face of impossible odds is something to be forever admired. The second was this single sentence: would we be like them? This question was on the wall in a section of the museum that shed faces and stories of those involved in the uprising, built into mirrors so you were always looking back at yourself. It was a very moving way to further encourage a level of introspection as you explored the museum. This is a question that I think about a lot whenever I visit somewhere commemorating a past conflict. Would I be capable of standing up in the same way? And this question always stirs up incredible feelings of gratitude because it's a question I've never had to answer as a direct result of the deeds of those who came before me. It's hard to even consider such a question without experiencing deep-seated fear at the same time. So truly understanding what these people went through in the middle of the Warsaw Uprising is impossible. But it's a privilege to stand here today and be able to learn their stories all these decades later. So while this was a heavy day, I'm glad I made the decision to spend it the way I did. But now it was time to move on to the rest of my Poland road trip.